Hey there, Fourth Trimester listeners. Our program today is proudly sponsored by Family Album, your secure haven for sharing baby photos and videos. Head over to the App Store today, search Family Album, one word, download the app, and start creating a legacy of love, one photo at a time. Hi, I'm Sarah Trott, and welcome to the Fourth Trimester Podcast. I'm a new mama, and this podcast is all about postpartum care for the first few months following birth, the time period also known as the fourth trimester. My postpartum doula, Esther Gallagher, is my co-host. She's a mother, grandmother, perinatal educator, birth and postpartum care provider. Fourth trimester care, our topic, is about the practical, emotional, and social support parents and baby require. And importantly, it helps set the tone for the continuing journey of parenting.
Hello again, listeners. It's Esther Gallagher here at the Fourth Trimester Podcast. Sarah won't be joining us today, but we have Jeanae Hopgood-Jones, who's going to tell us all about her work. But before I have her introduce herself, I just want to remind everybody that not only can you subscribe to this podcast, but we also have a Facebook page and we have a website, fourthtrimesterpodcast.com, which is just loaded with great stuff. So give yourself the chance to see what's going on both those platforms as well. And now I'd like to have Jeanae introduce herself. Jeanae, it's so lovely of you to make time for our podcast. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. So hello, listeners. My name is Jeanae Hopgood-Jones, and I do a whole bunch of stuff. But one of the main things that we're talking about today is the blog that I have. So I'm a blogger, and I have a blog that is in publication now for people who have experienced perinatal loss. It's specifically targeted to Black and Brown people who have experienced perinatal loss. So it's called blackangelmom.com. I also have a support group that's virtual in the Facebook community that exists for Black and Brown folks as well who have experienced perinatal loss. And I'm an angel parent. So I am a mom to two angel babies, Viva and Jorah, who were born June 7th, 2017. They passed away, obviously, and they kind of inspired me to do the work that I'm doing in this respect. I'm also a therapist. I'm a marriage and family therapist, couple and family therapist, and I'm also a clinical sexologist. So I study human sexuality, and I work with a variety of people around all issues related to that. And of course, I also do some perinatal mental health work for people who are pregnant.
That's just phenomenal, Jeanae. Just phenomenal. So amazing. Do you want to talk about what brought you to doing the blog work specifically?
Yeah. So I had a pretty interesting journey with trying to conceive. My spouse and I, it took us a good while, I would say about 2, 3, maybe even 4 years of trying to conceive. And we eventually conceived our daughters via in vitro fertilization. And unfortunately, at close to 17 weeks, one of my daughter's sacs ruptured, and they could not, because of how the shifting happened in my uterus, I couldn't birth her and save my other daughter because of the way that they were positioned. So basically I had to give birth to both of them, at the hospital. And that was really a challenging experience, to say the least. It really affected my life in a way that has been really profound and really, really challenging. So I've always been, when I was in undergrad, I actually was an English and psychology major. So I had always felt like I wanted to do some writing as it relates to mental health in some capacity. I just wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. So writing has always been a thing that I've done to kind of process and cope and just kind of sort through my thoughts and get things out of my brain and onto paper so that I can externalize them a little bit better. And so I just started writing. So they were born June 7th. And pretty much since I got discharged from the hospital, I would just write. And I said, okay, how can I honor the girls? It was really important to me that my experience with them and their life force and how powerful that was for me and for the people in our lives. It was really important to me that energy didn't just go out and dissipate. So I really wanted to do something that honored them, in a way that felt appropriate. So I had been kind of toying around with the idea of doing a blog before I got pregnant. But I was dragging my feet a little bit, to be honest. I had a lot of other stuff going on. But as I started writing, it just, I just started coming up with all these different entries. So I had like a ton of content, over like the first month or so after they passed. And I said, okay, I think I'm going to do a blog. So I went on to the platform and I started creating a draft site and it took me a while though to press like publish. I just was like, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to put all my business out here. I don't know if this is what I want to do. And with my profession as well, I wanted to be mindful that I wasn't just kind of spilling trauma all over the place, but but kept it in a way that would still be helpful for other people, but would also be helpful for me to kind of support me on this healing journey. So I talked with my spouse about it. I let my spouse read some of the stuff and I was like, are you okay with me posting this? And yeah, I got the green light and everyone was supportive and I pressed publish and it's been in existence since, I think I officially published in August, maybe. Of 2017. So it was maybe within like two months or so after they passed that I finally published the blog. And I really just, it's fluctuated a little bit in terms of the frequency of posting. So initially I was posting 2 entries every week in honor of both of the girls. But that's a lot. And
it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So things had to slow down a little bit, but I tend to post, every Wednesday because they were born on a Wednesday. So I tend to post a new entry every Wednesday for the readers. And it has definitely grown. I believe there's like 800 or something followers that are, that show up when I look at the statistics.
That's phenomenal.
So, yeah. So it really was inspired by them and by this journey and by the, what I felt was a lack of representation of Black and Brown people, specifically of Black people. Just be clear about that, of Black people talking about this type of experience. Like I felt I wasn't aware of how common like miscarriage or perinatal loss was until it happened to me. And I think that we all to a degree are aware of the possibility, right, that people miscarry. We're aware of that. We know that happens. But I don't think that people are very much aware of the probability, like how likely is it to occur. And that was just astounding to me that there were so many people who kind of came out of the woodworks and said, oh, this has happened to me. This has happened to me. This has happened to me. And, but yet when I was in support group communities or whatever, it still felt like I was the only one. So I wanted to create a space that really centered, obviously my healing journey, but also centered Black and Brown folks in the artwork and in the graphics that I use and in the nomenclature and the colloquialisms and things like that I use in the content that felt very authentic to Black culture. I wanted to make sure that there was a space for that. And then from that, things just kind of evolved with the Facebook group, which has also grown now to over 100 members, I believe, and started out with about 10 people. And that's a closed community that is called Black Angel Moms as well. That is specifically for Black women who are Black people who have experienced perinatal loss.
Gosh, such a supportive approach, these days, just finding each other whenever there's something that we're experiencing that we can't possibly be alone in. We're human beings, right? And so these things are existential. And yet, in this broader culture, I say it again and again, we get lost, so when someone like you can have the wherewithal to create this space for themselves and then share it.
Yeah.
That is just such an amazing creative thing to do with our loss, I think I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think loss of any kind feels like such a empty well.
Yeah.
Right. That you're down in the bottom of and you can't feel the sides of when you're in it.
Yep.
So to reach out and feel for the edges and the sides and the container and find a way to create.
Yeah.
Is just phenomenal. I
appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. There are two things I'm personally curious about, and I imagine our listeners would be. And of course, I want to interject here that I hope everyone will go and visit your site. But can you talk a little bit about your experience? And I know this is going to sound clinical, but I think for the listeners, we can all be, it's good to be in a place of understanding from the experiential of like your and I hate to use this term, but I think it's an important one, kind of your clinical journey. Because, we are all slowly, way too slowly being made aware of how the treatment of Black women specifically in the clinical setting is has historically,
present tense,
and is currently having such the word uncivilized comes to mind, but I'll let you talk about that, but also maybe more also about what you've already tapped into and touched on, which is the creative journey. So there, those two aspects of your personal journey, as much as you want, and not at all if you don't want to, of course.
Oh no, I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine to talk about this. Okay, so clinically, as in like medically and medical treatment or experiences that I've had in those communities. So, and I would say my journey to get pregnant was, it was trying, obviously, because it took a while and we didn't get to the IVF portion until the very end of our journey. We did, IUI, intrauterine insemination first, for a few times, and, that was unsuccessful. But the physician care, with the fertility clinic that we were working with was actually really, really great. We didn't have, they just seemed really supportive. They seemed very invested in our care and in our success. And I felt really comfortable with them. So that part of it was fine. What I will say is that when we had to leave the fertility clinic, because the fertility specialist, the endocrinologist, they're not practicing OBGYNs, right? So I had to switch over to an actual OBGYN. And it was an all women ran clinic. So I was like, okay, great. Like this will be good. This is exactly what I want. And they had a couple of Black physicians. So I was like, great. This is exactly, what I'm looking for. And, however, I gotta say that was not the most helpful experience. And with the girls, when I was pregnant with the girls, there was a period of about a week before they were born when I did notice leaking. And I called the doctor's office more than once to ask, because that was my first time, being pregnant, and it was my first time experiencing any of that. So I had asked a couple of people that I knew, like, hey, this is the Fourth Trimester Podcast, so I can be transparent. I'm assuming. Please. But, I would
graphic.
I would ask, people I know, I'm like, hey, this is coming out of my vagina. Like, what, what has this happened to you? Like, what do you think? People who had children or who had children recently. Most people were like, oh, lots of crazy things come out of your vagina. Don't worry about it. As long as you're not having any cramping or any bleeding or whatever, then you should be okay. And I said, okay, kind of still made me feel a little strange, because I was just like, it seems it would happen at times that felt like it shouldn't happen, or if I was doing like strenuous activity, like if I used to teach a dance class. So when I was dancing, or when I went on a walk on like a lunch break at work, I had like a significant, I feel like, amount of fluid that came out. And I was like, what is happening? And I even asked the person I know who is a midwife, and she said, well, it sounds like a little bit of your mucus plug might have come out, but it grows back. So it's not really that big a deal or whatever. So because she's in the profession, I was like, okay, I feel a little bit better because I talked to her, but I'm still going to call my doctor because this person is not my treating physician. Right. So I called the doctor's office. And both times that I called, they kind of dismissed me and told me, oh, it sounds like the babies are getting bigger now. It sounds like you're probably just peeing. And I said, this does not smell or look like pee. Like it smells like my vagina. Like I know, like it smells like it's coming from inside. It doesn't smell like it's like urine, and and it wasn't consistent. It didn't happen like every couple of minutes. It didn't, it wasn't like just flowing out, but it did happen enough that I had ruined a couple of pants, or I was out and it looked like I peed on myself, So just a dismissal happened a couple of times. And then I went in on June 6th for an appointment with the antenatal testing unit because I was 34 at the time. So they were doing all of the testing for trisomies and things like that. And, I was supposed to have an ultrasound that day, but for whatever reason, they didn't have me on the schedule to have an ultrasound. So I had to argue with them to get an ultrasound because I was concerned that I had been kind of leaking for like 2 weeks. And nobody, or like a week and a half, and no one had said anything. So like, no one told me to come in, right? Like that was the thing that, in hindsight, I'm just like, if this is happening, if your patient is calling you and saying that this is happening, how would you not say come in?
Exactly.
I'm not saying that could have made a difference necessarily, because what I've learned since is that sometimes when there is a rupture like that, like there's nothing that can be done anyway, but it would have been helpful to feel held and supported in that way instead of like dismissed as though I didn't know what I was talking about.
Exactly right. And it's the attitudinal stance, right? In retrospect, it's like, I'm telling you what I'm experiencing and you're saying, oh, don't worry.
Exactly.
And nobody feels better when they get that treatment.
Right. Right.
It's just not, of course, everyone wants to reassure you and hopes for the best, but the dismissal part is, emotionally, that's just not.
Yeah, it was really not okay. And the only reason that I I kind of waited was because when I called them, I believe it was like June 1st or something. So I said, or the last time I called them, it was like June 1st and I had the appointment on June 6th. So I said, okay, I'm just going to, when I go to my appointment, I'm for sure having an ultrasound, like they'll check everything out and, you know, and it should be fine. So we get there, we have the appointment. I have to argue with the people to do an ultrasound because they didn't have it on the schedule. They were just going to do blood work and blah, blah, blah. And, of course they do the ultrasound and the physician, because it wasn't an ultrasound tech. It was actually a doctor who did the ultrasound. He looked at the imagery and he was like, oh, your cervix is a little open. And then he's like, oh, this baby, he had her listed as baby B at the time, but actually she was baby A. This was, at first, but she moved when her sac ruptured. He's like, oh, this baby doesn't have enough fluid around her. And just like seeing the image, you could tell that Jorah is that baby who sac ruptured. You could tell that she didn't look like she was in distress, but she definitely she wasn't in the fetal position. Like she was almost stretched out. Yes. And, and there was very little fluid around her. So then he turns the screen and he leaves the room and then my spouse goes out and we had invited my mom in because my mom hadn't seen any of the ultrasound, like not live, since I had been pregnant. So we thought it was going to be a whole experience. And just that whole process was just obviously very traumatic and also infuriating because I was like, I called twice because I thought that something was wrong and you all dismissed me. So that was just, I was like livid and of course distraught and really emotional and just trying to figure out whether there was anything that we could do, to save both or at least one of them. Because Aviva's sac, who was originally baby B, but ended up being baby A because she was the one right up against my cervix. Her sac was totally fine. And she was intact and she was moving and heart rate was fine. Both of their heart rates were fine, actually. But in order for them to even get to Jorah, they probably would have ruptured Aviva's sac. So that's why I ended up having to give birth to both of them. And the midwife who was at the hospital, she was not helpful. She was very, I'm going to use the word abrasive. Like, I feel like she was really kind of like, well, you could stay here if you want to, but you could also just go home and let it start happening at home. And I was like, excuse me? Like, I'm totally not going to go home and like lose these babies in my house and like have to have them at home with no medical attention or what, like that just, that was like an absurd suggestion in my opinion at the time. But it felt, I don't know if that's how she felt she needed to be, but it felt very abrasive and insensitive and just like not okay. So we ended up refusing and we stayed.
Sure. But it's all in the attitudinal stance, isn't it? Like, imagine her coming to her and saying, what would help you feel the most supported and held in this moment that we understand is difficult for you? That's such a different thing to come to
absolutely
a family with than, you can go home if you want. Right. Like, that's not, oh my goodness. Yeah.
It totally would have given me a whole different feeling if she had come at that a different way.
Yeah. Whatever your personal, like whatever your personal preference.
Right.
You would have been in a place where you could have maybe asked the question, is it okay, do you think, for me to go home?
Right.
Is it okay if I just stay here? It feels right for me. Right. Instead of like, wow, whatever.
Right.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, that was just terrible. Thankfully, the birthing experience was good. My actual physician, I guess her shift was over or whatever, but a midwife, not the same one, birthed our girls or helped catch our girls, and that was a really beautiful experience. Her and her team, they were they were amazing. But the whole process prior to was really traumatic and really, really not supportive, not helpful. And, like you said, the whole attitudinal stance was just, I don't know. It just didn't feel sensitive and like a safe holding space, given the gravity of what was happening. And maybe, you know, this is their job, right? So like, maybe they come across this multiple times a day or every day or whatever. So I'm not delusional in thinking that they need to have all the sensitivity as though this is a one-time thing. However, I think there's a way for that to be handled that I don't feel like it was handled with me.
No. Well, I can think of so many points of intervention. You know, the doctor turning the screen and leaving you alone in the room, right? While that might have been something you would have chosen, right? And while it may have been necessary for him to leave the room, offering you some form of support in that moment. I can imagine, I'm a doula. I can imagine at least two things, right? Like, I'm going to have to leave the room to do this, this, and this on your behalf.
Right.
And I'm wondering, would you like me to have the midwife come in or, you know, whatever,
right.
Or would you prefer to have some time to yourselves, you know, and just call us when you're ready for us to come back in, right? Like any number of things, but certainly those things in that terrible moment to acknowledge, right? Just to acknowledge you're in a terrible place and no parent wants to be. And I don't want to just walk out of the room.
Right. Exactly.
Leaving you in a place that is unsupported if I can do otherwise. Yeah. And on and on and on, of course, you know. Wow.
Yeah. So that was a challenging experience. The saving grace really was that their birth, though hard, you know, because pain and whatnot. And of course, them eventually passing, they were born alive. So it was nice to actually see them moving and, you know, to hold them and things like that. That experience, their actual birth was sad, but it was beautiful. The other stuff was not helpful at all, but that part of it was beautiful. And I would even say that the care after, so I was able to, they were born at 9:04 and 9:23 p.m. So we were able to keep them in the room with us until I was discharged the following day. So they were with us and basically the transition was just to the funeral director. Like that was when I had to leave them, which was terrible. But everyone who came into the room the following day was very kind, and the hospital did a really great job with the photos that they took right after the girls were born and the whole memory box things that they gave us, and that was all great and really invaluable given what had happened, and it almost helped for a while for me to forget a little about the stuff that happened before. But, you know, yeah.
Jeanae, this is another clinical question, and I ask it with no intention of being insensitive, but did they actually induce your labor, or did you find yourself in labor just as this was all coming about?
They induced my labor. So I was, when on the 6th, when they did the ultrasound, the doctor did say that my cervix was open to, I think, about 2 centimeters. So that, I guess, had already started happening. I didn't experience any cramping or pain or anything that I can remember prior to, but they induced me with I forget if it was misoprostol or Cytotec, but they induced with like 6 of those pills, which was terrible.
It's their misoprostol is Cytotec.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So no, it's not, I mean, the whole situation is sad and of course, but, boy, oh boy.
It was not a great experience at all.
No. I'm wondering if, and I imagine your block may speak to this. I'm wondering if there's anything that you take away from this experience that you would especially want parents of color in the clinical setting to know or understand or be empowered with. If there's anything that's important for you to kind of send out into the world about situations like this.
I mean, one of the obvious things in my feeling is really just that you're not alone in this. So like use your community or find community for support because they call it the silent sadness for a reason, right? Like people don't have conversations about loss and about this type of loss in particular. But not having conversations about it does not make the sadness and the effects go away. So just not staying silent around it and not staying and trying to like just the whole idea of like strong Black woman concept of like I need to be able to handle all of this and not be affected emotionally is like BS, right? Like you can handle these things and in the same breath you can also be affected by them, right? So like just recognizing that it doesn't mean anything about your level of strength if you're affected by something that happens to you, especially something so significant as perinatal loss. So there's that part of it. The other part of it in terms of interacting with the medical community is really just to use your voice. I think that birth in general or any kind of thing around pregnancy just kind of, it makes anyone who's experiencing it nervous because so much stuff is happening to your body and there's a life inside you and things like that. So you're going to be a little bit nervous and you might not always be clear enough in your brain to think of all the questions to ask and all the things to do and advocate for and whatever, because you're dealing with a lot of other stuff. Having said that, I think it is really important to write things down, take a support person with you if you can, and to use your voice, like advocate for yourself and advocate for your care. There's things that I had to work through from my own healing around like, should I have like insisted that I come to the doctor, but you have to be careful about getting yourself, caught up in a guilt spiral. But
right. I mean, self-blame when you did what you could is not gonna.
Exactly. That doesn't help.
No, it
just
sadly
makes it worse.
And inappropriately placed.
Exactly.
Because you did speak to it. You did. Right?
I did call. Yeah. I called more than once. But, making sure that you just use your voice. Your voice is important. Your voice is valid. And I know that, Black people have a challenging history with the medical profession for very valid reasons.
Yes.
And it doesn't always feel like a safe space for Black people, specifically for Black women or Black people with a uterus and a vagina. Like it doesn't always feel like a safe space, given our history, the history of gynecology, right? So I think that, but it is important for you to recognize that it's not the same times as it was before. And you are valid. You have a voice. What you have to say is important and people need to hear you. So if you feel like something is up or something is going on, then you insist that you be seen. Or you find physicians, you find practices, you find groups, whatever, that have a very supportive perinatal community. So when that was one of the things when we thought about trying again, we were really intentional about like, I'm not going back to that same OB office. I need a space that has a very great supportive care network for people who are pregnant, and that they have like a hotline or something, and they have, you know, an emergency visit place where you can come in and get an ultrasound if you need to. Like, that was really important to me, just to be proactive for future tries of getting pregnant. So thinking about what it is that you need, what type of support you need to have, being clear about that in your communication with any subsequent physicians that you work with. Like, here was my experience before, and that was not helpful, and this is what I would like or need or what I'm looking for. So just to advocate for yourself and use your voice, I think is really, it's just really invaluable.
Hey, fellow parents, can we take a moment to reflect on the joyous chaos that is parenthood? You know those days when our hearts swell with love at the sight of our little ones and we're bursting at the seams to share every adorable moment with the world. But let's be real. Some things are better kept in the family, and your loved ones who matter the most aren't always close by, and they might not be that tech-savvy either. So how can you easily share your baby's beautiful growth with loved ones while keeping your precious memories secure? I remember the frustration of trying to use some of the big tech photo solutions, only to find they fell short of what I needed. That's when I stumbled upon something truly remarkable, the Family Album app. The Family Album app was created to give parents a secure and easy way to share photos and videos with loved ones. It's an orderly and totally secure haven for your family's personal memories. I love that there's no third-party ads, no unwanted eyes, unlimited storage, and that it's totally free. So to all the parents who are out there still trying to use other messaging apps for your kids' photos, it's time to level up your family photo game with a free photo sharing app. Head over to the App Store today, search Family Album, one word, download the app, and start creating a legacy of love one photo at a time.
Well, and I want to make this comment, while the feminist women's health movement of America was not perhaps always as inclusive as it should have been. It's the reason why anything has ever shifted in the obstetrical realm, and it's been slow. But while I think it's just hideously unfair that and I'll use a strong term, the victims are the ones who have to be out there doing the advocacy work, right? Like, that's just so wrong. Right. This medicine in America is a culture, and it's deeply entrenched in its ways of doing things.
Yes.
And, as unfortunate and inappropriate as it is, it's you, right, who has to be the one to stand up and say, you do this wrong, and it has terrible effects, and it needs to change. You need to change, right? That's how we get these cultures to change. And it won't, it's terrible that it might not be, very likely won't be in our lifetimes, right? I mean,
unfortunately,
I've been working on this shit, excuse my French, for 4 decades, in my own tiny little way. Not this specifically, but the whole realm of perinatal care, right, has been my focus, as it were. And as I've said on the podcast before, 40 years ago, I thought by the time my daughter was ready to give birth, it would be a very different landscape, and it is not. Right. But that's not, that's not a reason to give up hope. And the things that have changed have been wonderful things. We're starting to see midwives and more and more and more, people of color who are offering them the obstetric care.
Yes.
To such, it is a blessing. It feels right to me to be able to walk into a clinic and not just be sort of presented with older white males, because I don't feel safe in that environment. Right. I need an environment that is diverse to feel safe and supported. So, it's slow.
Mm-hmm.
And good for you, Jeanae. I mean, this is a powerful step. I wish you weren't burdened with it.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yes. It's but
that's one of the reasons that the blog is out there as well. It's like there are some things in it that kind of detail my experience or the challenges that I face. And there's also a whole section that I have called like 7 gems, and then it's like, you're welcome, and it gives you, usually 7 things about any given topic, but it's usually related to perinatal mental health or perinatal loss or something, that like things for you to use, very practical steps for you to take for yourself, to give to your support system, to plan for a future visit to the doctor. Like I have one on there that is specifically about here's some suggestions for you to do moving forward after you've had a loss. And if you're trying to conceive again, and like here's some things for you to think about and to be planful about. And that whole section of the blog is specifically for very practical, like, here's some things, here's some things you can put in your toolbox and that you can take with you, or that you can give, like I said, to your family and friends, to your support network, to say like, hey, I don't necessarily have the words to talk about this, but this makes sense to me. And this is something I think that you should read as a way for you to be a little bit more supportive to me, or a way for you that I would feel supported or helped by you. So I wanted to create those things for people that would just be easy one-offs, so that you just don't, because sometimes you just don't have the bandwidth to have some of the conversations when you're in grief and when you're dealing with stuff. So I wanted to create things for you to use that are very easily accessible and readable and fun and funny in some ways, and things like that.
Well, and the idea that these are things that you can share into your community to empower them to empower you, right? Like it's so lovely when it can be that reflexive.
Yes.
I think, because if there are things we don't know or we feel blocked by in the culture, right?
Right.
And we find out, a hack, we figure out a hack. We can't, if we just keep it to ourselves, nothing changes.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, this is why the Fourth Trimester Podcast, I mean, it is, as you know, like crazy how little even our own mothers know about the postpartum healing and recovery journey, wherever it begins from.
Right.
There's just so little that is understood about this life-changing moment. And therefore, you get those retorts from people, which are, you'll get through it.
Right. Exactly. That are super dismissive and super minimizing and invalidating all those things, Yeah. Yeah. And it happens a lot with perinatal loss. Obviously, people say things that I think that they're trying to be helpful. I'm going to, assume the best about people most of the time. I think they're trying to be helpful, but, oftentimes it just isn't. What you're saying is not helpful. And you need to understand that it's not helpful. And you need to understand why it's not helpful. And I'm going to give you, in some of my entries, I'm going to give you some alternatives, some things that you could say that would be helpful to folks.
Well, why don't you take a moment and maybe tell us one or more things that the culture needs to learn in terms of interacting with parents experiencing loss and grief. Do you mind?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
Sure. No, one of the main things is this whole silence, is this whole thing where people don't talk about it and people don't acknowledge what happened. And though I understand that death in particular is a challenging thing for a lot of people to discuss, and you're also not sure where a person is, like whether they want to talk about it or not. But like ignoring that it happened and acting as though it didn't, and just I'm just trying to get you out of the house. So we're going to go do this and do that. Or why don't you come to this party because you need to do, it's like, pause.
It's
like,
denial.
Exactly.
It's denial of your experience.
Exactly. So what is helpful is for you to, at minimum, say, I'm so sorry for your loss. You don't have to ask a bunch of questions. You don't have to, ask people to tell you about their birth story or whatever happened, but at least acknowledge that this loss happened and tell people that you're sorry that it happened to them. And then you can ask, like, is there anything that you can think of that you need? Most of the time, people are going to say, no, I can't think of anything, because they're consumed a lot of the time with their grief response. But just the offering is helpful. And then doing things that are really helpful. I always talk about my friend Elise, because she is just amazing. But after when the girls passed, I sent out a text to a few people. I didn't really want to talk to anybody, but I just wanted people who knew I was pregnant. I want them to know what happened. She came over to our house unprompted with like 10 bags of food from Whole Foods. Like, she just like went shopping. And she was like, I don't want you to have to think about cooking, have to think about figuring out what y'all are going to eat, like, here. Yeah. And she was like, I'm not staying. I'm not going to, like, I know y'all probably need some time, but I'm just coming to drop off some stuff for you. Yeah. That was so helpful.
And this was prepared food, right?
Yes.
So that it didn't just go bad in the fridge because you didn't want to stand at the stove and couldn't.
Exactly.
It was food that you could just shove in your mouth.
Just put it,
whether or not you were hungry.
Yes. You can eat it. You can put it in the microwave. You can put it in the oven if you want to warm it up or whatever. But like, it was just prepared food, and that was super duper helpful. So doing things like that, bring people food. My job, my team at work at the time had also gotten us it's almost like a meal delivery service, similar concept, where it was like 10 meals that were prepared for, so that we just didn't have to worry about cooking. So things like that are really helpful. And also, what I have discovered from talking to some of the women in the Black Angel Moms group, and also just having some other conversations with people in some of the in-person groups that I attended early on in our loss, people do want you to talk about their children. People do want you to ask, like, did you name them, or what was their name, or, how are you honoring them? Or is there a way that I can support you in honoring them? Like, can I plant something? One of my friends had 2 trees planted in honor of Aviva and Jorah, which is beautiful. Oh,
that is so beautiful.
Right. Like, it was just so sweet. And this is one of my friends who's like Heather. She's super bubbly and, she's always happy. I love her so much. So I don't know how comfortable it is for her to be in a sad place, but just her thinking about me and thinking about the girls and thinking about a way to honor them that can go on. Like, that was that was amazing. Another friend of ours got us cremation jewelry. And so we have their ashes. I have their ashes in some of their ashes in 2 necklaces, and my spouse has their ashes in a bracelet. So just like things like that are really thoughtful, ongoing ways to honor your little ones, ongoing ways to like support the parents.
Acknowledge that you are parents.
Right.
You
That's the
have
other thing.
children.
People totally will not acknowledge that, or not validate that people still consider themselves a mom or a parent. Like we adopted our son, probably within like, actually soon after our girls. It was probably within like 9 or 10 months after the girls passed away. But prior to adopting him, there definitely was a period where, I felt like I was their mom. But I definitely didn't feel like Aviva and Jorah's mom, but I definitely didn't feel accepted as a mom in community because my children weren't here.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to acknowledge and to also ask people, what do they want? Because there are also people who don't consider it themselves. So just respecting where people are and really asking the questions rather than making assumptions and figuring out where the people might be, the angel parents might be in their healing journey. For some people saying things like, this was something that for me was not helpful at all, but I understand for some people may be helpful. I was told or sent a GIF or something that said like, oh, well, your babies are sitting on Jesus's lap. And I was just like, that's not helpful for me, actually. Like, I know that for some people that might bring them solace, or like he needed your babies to pick flowers in his garden or whatever. Like, there's a lot of like religious rhetoric sometimes that comes across in this. And though I want to respect and understand that there are some people that is really helpful for, there are also a lot of people religiously affiliated and not, that is not helpful for. And I think that you have to really ask people what do they need, and also listen. Like, you have two ears and one mouth. Listen more than you speak. You know what I mean? So listen to what people are telling you and what it is that they need. And sometimes you don't need to say anything. You just need to be in the space with them and hug them and love them and bring them food. Always bring food.
Well, and Jeanae, I'm wondering if you think this is valid. What occurs to me with that kind of response, is what is inappropriate about it is that it sends an actual image, right? Mm-hmm. And that may be an image that, while very comforting to you personally, may not be for the bereaved parents, right? Like, I don't want to have a picture in my head of my babies sitting on Jesus' lap. I don't, right?
Right.
It takes up a space that I don't want it to take up, right? So does that resonate with you? Like,
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when people are thinking to themselves, well, what's wrong with it? To me, that's what's wrong with it. It's you're pawning off an image on me that just doesn't work.
Right. And you're making assumptions about what would be comforting to me. And people may be, and this is specifically, the Black community has sometimes has a strong tie to religion, right? So people are often really reconciling their faith when they have this kind of loss. They're trying to figure out, where do they stand with it? Often people are questioning, because then there really is this sense of like, why did this happen to me? Like, why would this horrible thing have to happen? So if I'm a person who's practicing and devoutly, embedded in Christianity, let's say, or whatever, like, I may be really angry at God or whatever deity. Like, I may be having a lot of feelings about that. And for you to then impose on me that this is now the person or the entity or the deity or whatever that has my children, and I'm angry, that creates a lot of, like, people are dealing with a lot of angst around it. And that's not necessarily a helpful thing for you to say in that moment. So again, it's really like about you not, and this is why I said also, like, it's not, I don't think that people are intending to be unhelpful. No, however,
they're coming from their personal place.
Exactly. But they're centering themselves and they're not centering you. And that's not helpful. So you have to figure out how to decenter. If you're a support person, you have to figure out how to decenter yourself and center the person who's had the experience.
Absolutely.
And try and show up for them in that way.
Such an excellent point. Yeah. Can I circle around to the friend who brought you food?
Yes.
And say out loud something I say on this podcast a lot, and have you, of course, respond to it. And that is that while so often the culture and naturally the people who show up in our space when we've given birth, however we have and whatever the outcome, you know, the focus in this culture is on the babies, right? However that focus is made. And yet your friend had the intelligence, I'll just say, the understanding that you and your partner are postpartum. You have given birth, and now you have a healing and recovery journey ahead of you, and you have to survive physically, whether you want to or not.
Right. That's real. Yep.
You know, and some of us have powerful moments with babies who are alive of not wanting to survive. You know, I mean, postpartum for the parents, and I will say particularly the mother, because that's my personal experience, is that I gave birth and my body, and therefore my brain, was going through so many profound changes, that having a friend, a family member who says, you know, your babies are great. You know, I'm sad they're not with you. Whatever they say, you know, whatever's appropriate.
Right.
But I'm here for you. Right? Yeah. Because I want you in my life. I want you to survive. I want you to be comforted and supported.
Yeah.
And you need to eat and sleep and use the bathroom. And I'm going to do your laundry today so that you can do those things. And if you want to talk, we talk. And if you don't want to talk, we don't.
Correct. Yep.
You know?
Yeah, those are invaluable friends and ideas, and people often do forget about, like you said, the people who are postpartum, and that they also need support and energy and love poured into them.
Yeah, not too much, right? Like it needs to be appropriate, right? And that's a hard thing to understand. I don't think we do enough to help people understand what the postpartum trajectory is for the parents. But yeah, whatever you can do to have some understanding of it before you walk in on it.
Right.
with all your great ideas.
Exactly.
I think it's important, and that's not a reason not to walk in. It's a reason to learn, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Jeanae, why don't you talk a little bit more about your, you know, in addition to your blog and your online support group, which are just brilliant. Do you want to talk a little bit about your practice?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm in private practice in the Philadelphia area, and I service, like I said, a few different types of clients, but my practice is geared towards people of color in general. But I focus, so I have a perinatal mental health component. So if you are trying to conceive, if you are actively pregnant, if you're postpartum, or if you have experienced perinatal loss, that's stuff that I have some training in and kind of have a specialty towards. And specifically for, like I said, for Black and Brown folk, and also for people of the LGBTQ community. So I just wanted, there's a gap, you know, there's a gap sometimes in resources for people in marginalized communities. And I really wanted to make sure that I have a space available for people to come who are dealing with any of those various intersections. I also am a clinical sexologist, of course, so I do some sex therapy and sexuality education for couples or partners, because it might be more than two people. And and I also do individual and family work and couples work just for general stuff. Things. Lots of people are dealing with anxiety in general in the world, or at least that's how they're terming it. So, you know, that's something that comes up a lot. And my practice is really geared towards helping people figure out how to live in alignment with what they're saying that they want in their lives, whether that's romantically or individually or professionally or in terms of their sexuality as a whole, not just like sexual orientation or sexual practices, but just like everything related to your sexual identity or sexual being. Kind of all of those things happen in my practice. So I've got couples I see, I have individuals I see, I have some families that I see for any of those various reasons.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. That just strikes me as holding a lot.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Yeah. Wow. That's just fantastic. Well, anything else you'd like our audience to hear from you? This has been just awesome, really.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for having me on. I think we kind of covered a lot. I definitely would encourage people if they feel up to it. The blog is called blackangelmom.com. It's not exclusively for Black and brown people. It's really just, it centers Black and brown people. So in a way that we are not often centered in other areas of the media. So, that's kind of the angle, but the information is valuable for anyone really who's experienced perinatal loss. So, I highly encourage folks to check it out, even if it's just that you check out the 7 gems section. That is, if you're looking for some things that you can share with your support network, like that's a great resource for folks. And then if you happen to identify as Black or of African descent and you are looking for a community of people, then feel free to request to join the Facebook community because it's available for anyone who identifies that way. And there'll be some other things coming down the pike that I'm working on creatively, product-wise, things like that will help folks also, or just be available for folks if they want that. But for now, the blog is accessible, and so is the Facebook group if anyone has any questions. And if you happen to be a person seeking other kinds of support, like as in therapeutic support, my actual therapy page is linked to the blog as well. So, you can visit that also if you're interested in seeking that kind of support.
That is fantastic. Jeanae, I am just so pleased that you were willing to come on the Fourth Trimester Podcast. I feel like you really got to the heart of so much of what needs to be said into the world right now about everything, really. We have this as a specific topic, but I think it really, there's kind of, I have this sort of image of a radiant quality, something that kind of has a powerful center, but that can radiate out in powerful ways into realms beyond being parents, just being part of a community at large and a culture that needs to change.
Yes.
So thank you again so much. And
thank you.
Yeah. And listeners, we're going to say goodbye. Again, I want you to feel invited to check out our various platforms, Facebook. I think we do the whole buffer thing with Instagram and all that. I'm a little bit of a Luddite when it comes to all that, but I do my best as a 60-year-old to contribute.
It's a lot. I understand. I'm struggling with it too, so it's okay.
Yeah, we probably, need your son to get busy, and it's like I'm always amazed that my 10-year-old grandson can show me how to do things. Thank you for listening. Please support us any way you can. And we look forward to hearing from you on those platforms. And everyone, hope you have a great day and take care. And thanks again, Jeanae.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
You can subscribe to this podcast in order to hear more from us. Thank you for listening, everyone, and I hope you'll join us next time on the Fourth Trimester. The theme music on this podcast was created by Sean Trott. Hear more at soundcloud.com/Sean Trott. Special thanks to my true loves, my husband Ben, daughter Penelope, and baby girl Evelyn. Don't forget to share the Fourth Trimester podcast with any new and expecting parents. I'm Sarah Trott. Goodbye for now.
Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing all that you can. I wrote the song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I'll sing a song for you. You got your wheels, you got your gears. You ride around town without any fear. You got your pedals, you got your brakes. You always wear your helmet for safety's sake. Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing all that you can. I wrote the song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I sing a song for you. Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing the best that you can. I wrote the song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I sing a song for you.